Well, here we are again with another episode of Something to Talk About, right?
Good morning.
Yeah. She's still Vaughn.
He's still Stuart.
Yeah, we're still here on opposite sides of the screen where we are every Wednesday. And
Yep.
I got some big news for you,
What's your
Vaughn.
news?
We have a sponsor.
Oh, that's awesome. Tell us
We
about
have a
our sponsor.
sponsor, Irving Chung, who is a franchise consultant. His company is bigconsideration.com. You can go to www.bigconsideration.com, or the phone number is on the screen right there. You can give him a call. If you have ever had the idea of wanting to be your own boss and be in your own business, and you thought, maybe I'd like to go into franchising, you need to call Irving Chung, because no obligation. He doesn't get paid for consulting with you. There's no fees involved. The consult is free, and there is no obligation. You can learn a lot about franchising, and you can find out that there are franchises available that are out there that don't cost a lot of moolah, so you can get into franchising. But we'll be talking more about it each week, and sharing more information about Irving Chung and bigconsideration.com. So we thank you for sponsoring.
So whatever, Stuart, whatever your business, he can help you turn it into a franchise. And
well, it maybe that, but more so if you're already working and you say, I'd like to do a little something on the side, you can actually be working full time and still own and have a franchise that you can build. He is not only helps people with franchises as a consultant, but he also is a franchisee. You've heard of Cycle Bar.
Yes.
That's Irving Chung. He has the Cycle Bar, and he is an avid stationary cyclist, and he leads classes, and so he knows what he's talking about. So they can
great. That's great.
Yeah, we'll talk about it, and we may invite him to come on our show sometime to talk about what he is doing in the franchise area too. So I'm sure he'd love to share that information with you and with all the rest of our audience.
Perfect.
So how are you?
I'm all good, and how about you? I'm
good. You're finished with the graduation. It's behind you, and now you're down to one young'un left in college.
Yes. And Elizabeth's a sophomore, so we got her all moved out of her dorm, and then she'll be moving into what was Emily's old house. Where Emily lived.
Oh, yep, she's a house legacy, huh?
She's a house legacy, exactly. They call it passing down, and so they pass the house down to Elizabeth and a couple of her friends, and
cool.
So we're doing a lot of moving. The theme of this summer seems to be shaping up to be move day, because we moved Ellie out of her dorm. We will, in a month or so, move Emily out of her house. Then after that, we'll move Elizabeth into her house. My parents are moving. Matthew and Jenna are moving. We've got a lot of people. We're all moving.
You might want to talk to Irving about getting into a moving franchise.
Actually, yeah, seriously.
You're doing a lot of it, because then you're going down to help relocate your folks down in Houston too. So you're going to keep on moving.
I'm going to keep on moving. Yeah, we're going to do that just to kind of help them sort through. Moving is not only physically exhausting, but it's mentally exhausting. We moved a lot. Phil and I moved a lot, and it was tiring, especially when you were moving with young kids. You're trying to do things and chase toddlers around, and it's a whole, moving is one of the top most stressful times in a person's life. So, no matter what age, it's just an exhausting experience. But mom and dad are at an age where really moving for them is going to be emotional, just because they're downsizing. And I think when you add that, it's one thing if you're just moving from one square footage to a similar square footage, and it's like a square peg into a square hole. But this is going to be a little bit, because they're going to have to part with some things, and that's going to be very difficult. So we're going to go down and help them kind of organize the house and kind of make piles of what's going to go with them, what's going to be donated, what's going to be sold, what's going to be, given away. You know what I'm saying? It's going to be a very
Absolutely.
emotional,
And
process.
you're doing it absolutely the right way, because far too often people that are moving, whether they're moving into a bigger house or they're downsizing, moving to a smaller house, the worst thing you can do is to pack up everything you've got currently and say, well, I'll go through it after we move. Why move it all and have to pack it and unpack it when now is the time to go through and say, I don't need all of these books. I don't need all of these extra pieces of artwork, whatever. I don't need all of this clothing,
Right.
and donate it and eliminate it now. That way, you don't have to carry it forward to the next place and then say, I don't know why I brought this. I don't really need it. I'm not going to use it.
Exactly. And, moving is a very good time to purge, exactly like what you just said.
Right.
Phil and I, let's see, we moved 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, I guess. And we always used it as an opportunity to purge. And I think that that's important. And so early on, the purging was pretty easy. It was toys, kids' toys that they don't use anymore, and clothes that don't fit, and whatever.
Right.
But I just think in this case right now, it's just going to be a little bit different because there are things that they just simply won't have room for, that they don't want to get rid of.
I was just going to mention that very, very often for so many years you've had that large family room couch, the couch and the love seat and 2, 3 more chairs, and you realize that I really don't need all of that. Or I've had that for many years and it's been comfortable and all, but maybe it's the time to donate that away. And then when we move into the new house, based on the new space, get something that's new and comfortable for the new days ahead.
And that's exactly, I agree with you, Stuart. And that's exactly what we're prepared to do. We're just going to go down there and walk through kind of the process, and just kind of talk through the different organizational kind of piles that we're going to need to make. And then once we're done with all that, they have hired a company to come in and do the packing, somebody to handle the estate, sale, right, which, by the way, will be online under today's circumstances. And so whatever doesn't sell, then the estate people will take with them. So we've got somebody to handle that. We have obviously somebody who will come in and box everything and move them. They're moving into a place that is wonderful, full of activities. I think they're going to love it. Once they get through this part, they'll be able to just settle in nicely to their new home, and it will all be great. And it's an exciting time for them because I think they're going to love the lifestyle over there. It's just getting through this part. So, yeah.
And they're both still active. And the one thing that they'll be able to do, which is exactly what I just finished doing, is they can always get in the car and go back and drive to the old neighborhood and look around and see what's going on. We both started talking about this going home, and I just did it this past weekend. I went back up north because my high school is being torn down after 105 years.
Oh, wow.
And it had a very, very rich history, both in athletics and academics and all over those decades. And this past weekend, some organizers put together what they called the Last Look Reunion. And people from 20 different classes. We had people there from the class, if you can believe this, from the class of 1945.
Oh, that's awesome.
There was a person there from 1945. He's well into his mid 90s. Was there up to some graduates from 1975, and they all attended. They had a presentation from the great grandson of the architect of the school that talked about the old days when the school was brand new and what it's gone through, and it was a fascinating weekend. But it gave me an opportunity when, that there's that old phrase, you can never go back. Yeah, you can. It may be different, but you can go back. We drove back up there, went back to our old neighborhood in Illinois where we raised our kids. And the house that we lived in is still there. The shrubbery is different. Some things are different. The structure of the house, which also was 100-year-old house, is
Wow.
still there, still the same. Drove to the neighborhood I grew up in and my parents lived in for almost 70 years, and still a vital neighborhood. And it's fun because you probably find yourself doing this too. When you drive through your old neighborhood, you don't know who lives in any of those houses today, but you go through and you say, "Oh yeah, that's where the Joneses lived, and that's where the Smiths lived, and oh, that's where the kids that I used to play on the playground with." And that neighborhood still exists, and it is so much fun to go back in those memories and to recall all of those things, and then get together with your classmates from high school. That was a real hoot. We had a great
Well,
time.
let me before you get on to your experiences with your classmates, I have to ask you though. So when you went and saw your old high school, first of all, I have to ask you, why are they tearing it down?
Progress. What they've done is they've determined that in our heyday when we were growing up, they built like where we live here in Frisco. 8 years ago when we moved here, I think there was 3 high schools, maybe
Right.
4 high schools. Now we're up to number 10. Well,
Right.
I grew up during that industrial revolution after World War II, the baby boomers, and they couldn't build those elementary schools and high school fast enough. Well, now they've gotten to the point where the population is diminishing up in those industrial areas, and so what they've done is they're tearing down 3 old high schools and consolidating them into one new massive school, which is going to be middle school through high school. So it's going to be one large facility. What they did was the new school is being built on what used to be the parking lot and uh, uh, football field for the existing high school. Once that's finished, they'll tear down the old high school, and that's going to be the new parking lot. And then they have other area for the athletics. But I went to a high school that back in the mid '60s dominated sports in the state of Indiana, and it was just phenomenal. Going down as I say, the school is a shell of what it was now because they've already started taking everything off the walls and out of the rooms. But they took a lot of the old photographs, so they took them off the wall and they lined them up down the main hallway and all against the lockers so everybody can go by. And every weekend they're having these tours for people to go back and see the old high school. And it's a shame that they have to tear down a what I think should have been kept and improved as a historical site. But again, that's progress. And you find that some of these old schools, like old buildings,
Right.
it's more cost effective to tear it down and build new than it is to try and upgrade them.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and then you said that when you went back, it was fun, and you used the word fun and all that. Like, I have revisited my old stomping grounds before. I've gone back to my old home in New Jersey, and I've gone back to my old home in Houston. I even got to go into that house, the one in Houston, and they had made all kinds of changes to it, knocked down walls, redefined rooms, added on and whatnot. So that was, and then Phil and I have even gone back and revisited some of our old homes with our children. And for me, it tugged at my heart a little bit. It was sweet, nice, and it was wonderful to see that the home still stood, and like those types of feelings were good. But then it just made me a little melancholy. I don't know. It wasn't like necessarily a walk away uplifting experience. I just felt like I missed those times more than anything.
You're right, but I mean, I think it probably would have been if we had gone back to either of the homes that we lived in that area, and seen that it had been torn down. That really would have been hard to accept, to know that it's still there. And we unfortunately did not have the opportunity to knock on the door and say, hey, I used to live here. And granted, they probably did do some upgrading. I couldn't tell from my childhood home that the house had been upgraded. The two huge oak trees that were in the front yard are still there.
Oh, awesome.
And
Yeah.
probably will be forever. They are absolutely
Mm-hmm.
massive in size, but all the other landscaping around the front of the house and all has all been taken out and removed. But the one thing they did was they upgraded the garage in the back. The garage used to have a little sitting area that was a screened-in porch. Well, those screens were falling apart for years and years and years, and the people must have enclosed it and put new siding around the garage. So you saw some of those upgrades. But just to drive down the streets of the old town that you grew up in, you probably see this when you go back to New Jersey. Almost everything is the same, but you still go by and you say, the dress shop used to be there and the movie theater used to be there. And we used to go to that building for candy. And there used to be a restaurant over on that. I think that's a part of our psyche, is to go back and refresh those old memories and to remember it. And it's all completely, because it could be all boarded up and some of it's torn down, but it's still memories. Reminds me of that Bruce Springsteen song, "My Home, Your Hometown."
Yeah.
It's, you talk about it, it's going to happen. I mean, nothing can stay the same that long.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because you and I are talking about going back to family homes where we once lived years and, decades ago.
Right.
But you can have that same feeling even going back home after just being away for a even short period of time. And I use my girls as an example because we were driving in the car just the other day, the three of us, me, Elizabeth, and Emily. And Elizabeth, they've both been at college for the year with occasional trips back home, whatnot. But for the most part, they're gone for big chunks of time. And of course, when you're living in an area like Frisco, where you could go to the grocery store and drive home and a new building has been built in your backyard. I mean, the growth here is just constant. But Emily said, Elizabeth, we were driving and Elizabeth said, gosh, what is that over there? It was a new building, a business building or something had just been constructed. And Emily said, well, Emily now had just finished her 4th year at college. So she's been coming and going from home to college life.
And she's starting to see some of those changes.
And she said, Elizabeth, get used to this. She said, because while you're at school, when you come home, everything's just going to look different to you almost each and every time you come home. Just going to look different. It might not be here in Frisco. There is a lot of construction, so it will probably be different in a big way, more obvious way. But even just being away for little chunks of time and coming back, things just look different. Mrs. Jones redid her landscaping, or the convenience store down the street that you used to go to closed, or whatever. So it doesn't have to be years and years ago. You can just go away for a little bit of time.
You're right. It may only be a decade or so, but even where we live now, there used to be this little French restaurant over here in that building. Now then it's closed and it became a taco restaurant. Then that closed and now it's a burger place. But you go through and you remember what it was originally. And then you start saying, well, you remember when we used to go there for this food or that food. So
Right.
it doesn't have to be 100 years old. It can be 10 or 20 years ago that things have changed. The buildings may still be there. The area may still be there and thriving, but businesses come and go. And so things are changed.
Did y'all have, I'm looking here, Carvel by any chance?
Yes, we did. Actually, Carvel was more in. I remember Carvel from New Jersey.
That's where I'm thinking, and that's me.
I was born in New Jersey, and I used to go back there every summer to stay with my grandparents. And I remember Carvel ice cream originally from there. We never had Carvel until just maybe the last 20 years up in the Midwest.
Okay. Yeah.
Dairy Queen was just huge in the Midwest, and it still is.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell us now, because you were about to tell us of about then running into. So it sounds like a lot of people went back for this. What did they call it again?
It was called the Last Look Reunion.
I love that. So
And
what? So a lot of people attend. It was well attended.
it was very well attended. There were three things. On Friday night, we had a pizza party at a place, and there were probably well over 100 classmates that were there. And again, when I say classmates, that was basically 62 to 65.
Okay.
There was that group of classes. Then the next morning at the school, there were well over 350 people that were in the auditorium for the presentations. And then we broke into groups of about 20, and they had the current class of high school seniors and from the National Honor Society that took each of the groups and led us all through the school. And it was a 3-story high school, and it was fun going for everywhere from the science and physics labs that were up on the 3rd floor. And honestly, I got to tell you, it's the same equipment that is in there that was in there 50 years ago. The same sink, the same beakers, everything sitting on the tables. But then we went through the main hall and went down to where the remodeled cafeteria was, but we also had an indoor swimming pool. And that is still there. It's been remodeled and refurbished over the years, but we also had extremely strong swimming teams. And the one comment that came up as we went down to the bottom level and went through the pool is we all remembered that when we took swimming class in high school, there were no bathing suits.
I'm sorry.
When you took swimming class, the boys all swam in the nude, and then you'd go into shower up and get dressed and go to the next class.
You're kidding.
I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding.
There has to be somewhere in there something illegal.
Well, I'm sure that the health department many years later said, you know what? I think the kids all have to. Now, when they competed, yeah, they wore swimming suits, but the classes,
Stuart, I've never heard. Are you sure that you remember?
Now, I don't remember whether the girls wore Speedo type suits or whatever they were called back in the 60s, but the boys, they didn't have suits, just jump. There were 6 lanes, and you'd jump in and you'd swim to the other side and swim back and get out and throw a towel around you.
I've never heard of such a thing. I can't even imagine.
But those were the days, folks. And that's what going to reunions is all about, because we just spent, and then that's the Saturday night, there were about 130 of us that went to a nice restaurant that's been around for about 80 years. And we all shared a dinner, and yours truly got to MC the evening, and I had an absolute ball doing it. They did have a breakfast the next morning, but we hit the road. But you know how we think when we get into our older years, all of a sudden you can't remember where you left your car keys, and you start to get this borderline dementia. Boy, you go back to places where you were 50, 60 years ago. It's amazing. We started talking about the movies, and we could remember all the actors and actresses that were in the movies. We were talking about the cast of some of the high school plays. It's so much fun, and I encourage all of our viewers and listeners, if you get that email or that letter in the mail that says we're having a 20, 30, 40, 50-year reunion, do yourself a favor and sign up and go, because it is so much fun. And granted, some of us are walking around very easily. There were a lot of our classmates that were needed assistance with walkers or canes. Some, have had it tougher than others. Some have been fighting debilitating diseases for years. But but boy, when you all get together and share those memories and everything, it's like everything is all erased. Everybody, and we all had our high school graduation pictures on a lanyard. So you found yourself walking around because you knew these people were in your class, but you didn't recognize them, and you'd see their high school graduation picture. You'd say, Carol, oh, I remember you. Yeah, we had lit together, or we were in the same science class. How are you? And you share those old memories. It's absolutely thrilling.
It sounds like you had a great experience. How long were you there the whole time? I mean, for the whole trip?
We were only in Hammond there for 2.5 days. And then we went on to visit my sister in Indianapolis, and we were in Indianapolis on Sunday. We spent Sunday night. We were watching the weather back here in Texas, and they were talking about storms and hail and high winds. And so we got on the road early on Monday morning, planning on getting past Memphis. And as we were on the road, we kept hearing about what was coming into our area. We stayed on the road. We drove straight through 14 hours from Indianapolis to home. Wow. Got up the next day on Tuesday for all of these storms and hail, and we had nothing here.
Yeah, I know.
But
we very often here, we kind of.
It was all south of the city. Yeah.
Prepare. And it does sometimes seem to either split or shift or whatever. But yeah. So let me ask you this. So I love that experience for you. My old high school, I spent my early years in New Jersey, but then I spent my later childhood years, teenage years, I should say, in Houston. And so my high school is still standing and still there. And they've expanded and they've just built onto that school. Having said that, my school still stands, but a couple other high schools have been taken down, and then the student population has been kind of moved around the district. Yeah, but my school still. And I go back and I look at it and I just go down memory lane. I took the kids actually not too long ago, and I took them up. It's a 3-story building, Stratford High School. 3-story building, and I took them up to the 3rd floor staircase, and there was a big wall, kind of a half wall around the top of the staircase, and that was the 3rd floor stairs. And that was you only could hang out up on the 3rd floor stairs if you were a senior. That's where all the seniors got to kind of hang out. You would never, as a freshman or a sophomore, maybe if you were a cool junior and maybe you were friends with some seniors or dating a senior or whatever connection you might have to the 3rd floor stairs, you could go hang out up there. But it was almost like a rite of passage. It was like a tradition. It was kind of like the 3rd floor stairs. And you knew that those were the, kind of the cool and the seniors and the whatever, the older student population. So I told the kids when I took them up the stairs, I said, oh, the 3rd floor stairs. And they're just kind of looking at me like, what? I mean, I said, no, this was the place to be, right here, the 3rd floor stairs. And they still look the same. The school still looks the same. But as I just walked around the building, it just memories that I hadn't thought about in years, just all of a sudden just were triggered. Oh, this hallway here, this hallway here, or this is, where Coach started, or this is, and it was a fun experience for me. That was a fun experience for me, kind of to your point, because the school's still there and it still is. And I even see on Facebook now, somebody posted Stratford senior prom. So I still even get to see some activity on Facebook now, which is kind of nice. I don't know if you ever saw updates, from your high school that you just visited, but social media is keeping us a little bit connected to our past too, right?
Right. And our social media has been showing how they have been, moving the students now, because they're going to be the last graduating class is only a couple of weeks away from graduating, and they've condensed a lot of the classes into fewer areas. Like the third floor, there were no desks in most of the rooms up there because they brought everything down to the lower 2 floors for the closing of the school. But my greatest memories, I walked into school, and a lot of us, we got onto the main floor and you'd walk down the hall. Oh, that's where the bookstore used to be, or that's where so-and-so's office used to be. But the one that got me was I walked up the main stairs and I turned to the right and walked to the second door on the left. And that was Mr. Freeling's office. Mr. Freeling was the disciplinarian. He was an assistant principal. And if you got into trouble, you were sent to Mr. Freeling's office. That office is still there. The detention area in that office is still there. And I could even point to the desk that I spent so much of my high school time in, because I got to know Mr. Freeling, the disciplinary principal, more than any other teacher in the whole school. And I clearly remember that there was a Friday afternoon that I went in. I was sent to see Mr. Freeling on a Friday afternoon. And I walk into his office and he says to me, "Stuart, I honestly was afraid that an entire week was going to go by that I didn't see you in my office." And I made it on a Friday afternoon and was in detention and had to sit there for an extra hour or two. But
you bad boy.
Those were some of my high school memories. Hey,
But
by the way, before we go any further, I got something I got to show you, and I will connect with you and get this to you. But this is for you.
Oh, look at that. Did you get yourself a
This was the
t-shirt?
Final Four. What makes this shirt special for you was my sister got this for you at Lucas Oil Stadium, the site of the tournament.
Oh, wow.
So this came from the actual venue. And I
That
will
is
get that to you.
awesome.
And I'm even having my coffee in my Final Four mug.
Look at you.
But that was actually from the on-site, so you'll
That's
have
really cool
something
because she was there, right?
she worked the tournament, the whole tournament, so she was right there, right
So
down to
I
the
have to ask, who was she rooting for?
right. Well, she was just going back and forth and all, but as the teams, well, Baylor was not Baylor, Butler was in it from Indianapolis, and so she was, but they went out in one of the early rounds.
Right.
But I told her keep your eyes on Baylor, and also she did. And my brother-in-law, and all there in Indianapolis, actually got a degree at Baylor, so he was pushing for Baylor the whole time.
Awesome.
Too.
I tell you what, Scott Drew, they are singing his praises in the news today, right? Almost every morning we open up the paper to see something about Scott Drew, how people are flooding to be on his team, and just, talking about how he rebuilt Baylor's basketball program and this and that.
Yeah, I still love when they did the interview with him, and when he came out. What about, was it about 10 years ago or so?
Maybe,
and when they asked him, how do you plan to rebuild the program, and he says, it isn't a matter of will I build the program. He says, I want a championship. That's what I'm here for. Yeah. I'm accepting this job today to bring you a championship. And
I want to say, Stuart, that was like 20 years ago, wasn't it?
I don't remember, but just I remember they played that part that says, I will bring Baylor a championship. And now they're saying to him, what do you do for an encore? Well, let's go for back-to-back.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I love the t-shirt and I love your mug.
Yep. And so, it will be yours, but that's also part of that traveling back. You travel back in your memories, you travel back in time.
So, we're talking about like high schools and homes and whatever, but have you ever gone back to one of either your old elementary schools or an old elementary school of one of your kids?
Yeah, and it's funny because it's like the same path. I had to travel to an elementary school when I was a kid because as I said, we were in a big growth spurt, and then they finally built an elementary school when I was in 4th grade that was, I want to say, a half a mile from my house. So 4th grade, I went there, but it was only for 4th and 5th and 6th grade. And then we went to it was called a junior high back then.
Right.
And that was for 7th and 8th. And then you went to high school for 9 through 12. Well, that elementary school is gone. They did the same thing. They built a more modern school right behind it and tore down the one that I went to in fourth grade. My kids, the grade school that was there when we moved into Flossmoor, Illinois, in when they were young, that was only for a couple of years, and then they tore that school down, and the kids went to another school. So it was always that progress, because the population was exploding, and the schools, they either didn't have the land to expand the existing school, so they would find a plot of land that they could build a new school. But when you just drive through those towns, there's now a beautiful park where my son's elementary school was. But you still drive around that park and you say, oh, you remember Levitt Avenue School? You used to sit right there where the park is. And so that's the part of the memories. Lauren is from the south side of Chicago, and we generally like to drive around her old neighborhood, which has changed in many, many ways over the years. But that's part of the fun of going back and revisiting, whether it's revisiting your old hometowns, or maybe it was just revisiting a city or a town that you used to visit when you were young. It's fun to go back and see who's there and who's not there anymore.
Yeah.
Because like I said, our Saturday evening dinner was in a restaurant that is probably the last dinosaur of a family-owned restaurant that's back in that area. There used to be another one further north up by Lake Michigan, and all, but that's been gone for about 5 or 6 years. But this restaurant, Teeble's, has been there since the 20s. So they're over 100 years old now, and still serving the same food. There's that cat again. Hi.
I honestly don't know why.
That's still Elizabeth's cat.
That's my cat, Rocky.
Oh, that's your cat, Rocky.
And then Ruka's flying around here somewhere. That's Emily's cat.
But not in Rocky's way.
Well, I think that's why he just came up here. He gets to higher ground when she's messing with him. So, well, she's actually, I see her now on the on a chair in here, whatever. Cats are funny when computers turn on, they like to have their moment.
The lights from the screen and everything.
I don't know.
And also the fact that you're talking to somebody else and you're not paying any attention to them.
Exactly. I went back to my old elementary school years ago in New Jersey, and I actually went to my old one in Houston as well. But anyway, it doesn't matter. It's funny because you know how people say everything just seems so small. And what I remember as just this big school, and I was, at that time, little Vaughn Catuzzi, and I'm going to get lost going from math to English or whatever. And, I go back and I look at these schools. I'm like, how did I ever think that I could get lost in this little building? But back then it was just like this big, scary kind of, space. And, it just all seemed so small and, not intimidating the way I remember it to be. I don't remember my high school so much like that, but when I have gone back to revisit my elementary schools, that's the first thing that usually hits me is, wow, this is not the way I remember it. Probably because we were just so much younger then.
The one thing we kept saying as we were walking through the school was it was a three-story school. Large. We had probably about 3,000 students in the high school back in the heyday. And we kept saying, how did we ever get from the class on the third floor north to our second period class, which was down on the first floor south? You had like 5 minutes between classes. That bell would ring, and if your class was from the north end of the school to the south end of the school, you had to hustle to get there and get in your seat in time. And wondered, how did we ever accomplish that?
And especially when you wanted to chat along the way.
Yeah.
I mean, because I I mean, I want to say they gave us what, 8 minutes in between classes, maybe 7.
Oh, we had 5.
You remember that you had 5.
We all remembered that it was only 5 minutes, and why didn't they ever increase that? Because
Yeah.
if you had to stop at your locker to switch books or something, now you had to figure out how. I got 2 minutes to get to my locker. I got 1
Right.
minute to switch books, and now I got 2 minutes to get to the next class.
Yeah, it was not enough. They didn't give you enough time to really because you're right. If you ever had to get to if you had to go back to, sometimes if you had little time, you would bring the books with you for the following class, but if ever you wanted to meet up with your girlfriends or your boyfriend or whatever, you
Right.
run back up to your locker and
And we didn't have backpacks in those days. You carried your books under your arm. There were a couple of geeks back then that used to have briefcases that used to put a lot of their stuff in briefcases and carry that, but that was kind of uncool. So you carried your books and your paper and your tablets and your pencil box or whatever in your arms. And also, if you had to stop and go to the bathroom, you were pretty much in trouble.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, Phil's just chiming in. At his school, he had 7 minutes. He remembers he had 7, and I think I remember that I had more than 5 as well. I want to say I probably had 7 too.
Now, we were under the gun, and the bell would go off, and then if you'd get a I don't remember what they called it. They would issue up like a pink slip or something you would get if you were tardy. That was the word in those days. You were tardy.
Yes, you were tardy.
The only advantage was that, with the last name Sachs, most of the classes were alphabetical. So if your last name began with an A or a B, you were in the front row. Well, with a Sachs, I could come in through the back door and everything. And if you were running a little late, you could sometimes just weasel in and get to your seat before the teacher would notice that you were late.
Well, not me. I was Catuzzi.
You were a C, so you were up
there. Yep. Yep, I was right up there. But we are going to Houston this weekend, coming up here this coming week, and I might just take the girls by I've taken them to my high school. I have not taken them to my elementary school. And our school was set up like yours. We had elementary 1 through 5, and then we had middle school or junior high 6 through 8. Then we had high school 9 through 12. So ours was like yours. So I've taken them to my high school, but I've not taken them to my elementary or junior high, which I think I might after this conversation, I might just have to swing by with them.
Yeah, it's great to share those memories with them, but the more that you share with them, the more that you're going to remember and see. And I used to do this and I used to do that.
Yes, definitely. It's fun, and I have actually a lot of friends of mine who stayed in Houston, or just really people I know, and I can see them on Facebook or whatnot. I have a lot of them who stayed in Houston. I mean, I moved pretty much right away out of the Houston area, Philadelphia, Dallas, New Jersey, back to Dallas. So I kind of moved away, but I have friends who stayed there, and now their children go to our schools. And I think that's kind of cool. The one post that I was telling you about, the senior prom, it was actually a girl I knew in high school. Her daughter was attending the Stratford senior prom, and that was kind of neat. So that's kind of neat if you stay in an area long enough to where then your kids go through the same, schools and businesses and restaurants and ice cream places and get to go to those places that you grew up going to. We moved away, so our kids didn't have that opportunity.
Yeah, well, as I say, my high school, I mean, there was, sometimes there were maybe 5-6 generations that went through that school.
Yeah, that's
and I wish the new school all the best of luck. But the Hammond High Wildcats a month from now are going to be history, and I think the new school is called Hammond Central, and it's going to be the Hammond Central Wolves or something. There was a big controversy about whether they were going to be named the Wildcats again, and a lot of people said, "Hey, that part of it you don't get to keep. That goes down with the bricks.
Uh, yeah. Well,
But
hopefully they'll do some kind of, I don't know, maybe some kind of a mural or something, or of the school or something that keeps its memory alive.
yeah,
Excuse me.
well, we talked about maybe once they get the school down and they put the parking lot in, that maybe 5 years from now we'll all get together and we'll build a bonfire in the parking lot like we used to in high school, and
There
all
you
get
go.
together for that. But
There you go. The building can be taken down, but your traditions can live on
that's right.
forever.
The memories remain forever.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
again, I encourage all of our watchers and listeners to take advantage of those memories and nostalgia. And if you have the opportunity to go back to your hometown sometime just to revisit and all, do it. It is so much fun to remember where, everything either still is or where it was. And I
Sounds
wish you the
good.
best of luck this weekend to
Thank you.
your folks and all in their relocation, and work. You'll get a good workout moving.
Bend at the knees.
I'm sure. Yeah. And you may still be down there next week, so you may be skating out for next week's show, but maybe Lauren will jump into your co-hosting seat. But just take care of my regards to your folks.
Thank you so much.
And I'll get the T-shirt to you when you get
Thank
back.
you. Oh, tell your sister thank you. That was so sweet.
I sure will. And that'll do
it.
it for another edition of Something to Talk About. Join us again next week. And if you want more information about Christine Dean at DFW Networking Diva, or from Irving Chung, who is the franchise specialist and consultant, and I'll email me, go onto the website. We'll connect you with them. And until then, we'll see you and be well. Take care. Bye.
Bye.